Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Hit the bell icon button so that you don't miss out any tutorial.
Alright, so before we jump into MongoDB, let's first talk a little bit about what a NoSQL database actually is. So NoSQL actually stands for Not Only SQL. Many people think it actually means no SQL, as if it weren't possible to use structured query language with these databases, and that's not true. It's possible in many cases if that's what you want to do. A better way, or a better meaning for NoSQL, is non-relational. Alright, SQL is just a syntax to interact with a database, but NoSQL is fundamentally different than a relational model. Alright, NoSQL databases don't use tables or columns. They have dynamic schemas that are sometimes even called schemaless. So we don't predefine tables and field types and all of that like you would with a relational database. So NoSQL is a growing industry because it serves and handles big data much better than relational databases do. Alright, with the popularity of social networks, there's just so much data out there, and NoSQL is a good system to handle those massive amounts. Alright, and with that said, there's many advantages over traditional relational database systems. Alright, so let's take a look at some of those advantages. So first we have scaling. So relational databases can be a nightmare to scale. It's oftentimes difficult, it's expensive, and they use a scale-up method, which means that you need to add proprietary, expensive resources to a single form factor. So upping the CPU, adding more RAM, and so on, until you get to that point where you just can't add anymore. NoSQL, however, uses a scale-out method, meaning that if we run out of disk space, then we can simply expand by adding more clients, and not expensive, powerful systems, but commodity hardware. Alright, so it's much easier and it's much cheaper to scale. NoSQL can also handle very large volumes of unstructured and structured data. It's cheaper and easier to manage, and not just on a scaling basis, but all around. Okay, it's also extremely flexible and schemaless. Now, when I say schemaless, I mean at the database level. So if we were to look at MySQL, for example, and say we wanted a table for blog posts, all right, we can't even think about the code just yet. We'd have to create the table either through the command line or something like phpMyAdmin. We'd have to create all the columns. We'd have to create the fields along with the types, whether it's a string or an integer. There's none of this with NoSQL. We can simply create our schema on the fly through our application. Alright, and most NoSQL databases are also capable of simple replication, and this is really important in the event of a power outage as well as planned or unplanned maintenance. There's generally no requirements or separate applications needed for replication like you would need with a relational system. Alright, now there's different types of NoSQL databases, so let's go over those main types. So first of all, we have a document database, which is what MongoDB is. This is actually the most popular type and seems to be the most powerful. Data is stored in a document, which is essentially in the format of a JSON object. If you know JSON syntax, then picking up MongoDB and other document databases it's going to be really easy for you. Alright, and we'll talk more about documents in the next video. We also have key value stores, which are the simplest type of NoSQL databases. They use key value pairs in a hash table, so a unique key is basically a pointer to the value. There's also column-oriented databases, or column stores, where data is stored in cells that are grouped in columns of data, rather than in rows. Okay, and columns are grouped into what's called a family. So these are generally for storing and processing huge amounts of data. There's also graph databases, which are really cool. We have a course on Neo4j, which is the most popular graph database. Graph databases use nodes with key value pairs, and then they can map and build relationships with other nodes through what's called an edge. So these are great for data that has a lot of relationships, things like social networks, alright, where you have users that are friends with other users that share messages and photos, things like that. Alright, and then we finally have caching systems such as Redis and Memcached, and these are where the data is actually stored in memory as opposed to on disk. Although with Redis you do have the option to push the data to disk. So before we jump in and install MongoDB, let's take a real quick look at what it is. So MongoDB is an open source document database, which is a type of NoSQL database. It's by far the most popular. It's cross-platform. It's on Windows, Linux, and Mac. MongoDB was first created back in 2007 by a company called 10gen, which is now just known as MongoDB. And it's been used on popular websites like Craigslist, eBay, Foursquare, and more. MongoDB was built for today's web. Relational databases are great for certain tasks such as calculations and operations, but they lack in many areas such as big data, social networks, and cloud computing. Alright, so MongoDB was built for these things. It can handle not only structured data, but unstructured and semi-structured data. It can support millions of users as well as hundreds of terabytes of data, and it was also built to adapt to new development methods and technology. Alright, so MongoDB is going to be around for quite a long time. So as I said in the last video, MongoDB uses the data model, and data is stored in documents. These documents are essentially JSON objects. It actually uses BSON, which is JSON along with some additional data types and features. Alright, so values can contain strings, numbers, arrays, objects, object IDs, and null values. Object IDs are actually created automatically by MongoDB and used as a unique identifier. Alright, so documents are stored in collections which can be loosely compared to tables, although you usually don't have to predefine collections like you would with a table. You can do it through your application. So let's take a look at a quick example here of a document, and if you know, like I said before, if you know JSON syntax, this should look very, very familiar. We have an underscore ID field, which usually is an object ID. Here I just have it as a 1, but it's usually an object ID, which is a long string of numbers. Then we have a name, which is a string value of John Doe. We have an email with a string value, an age with a number value. Okay, now if you're using decimals or floats, those are going to be number field types. Address, this is actually an embedded object. So we have a street, a city, and a state, which are all strings. And then down here we have memberships, which is an array of strings. Alright, so we can use these data types within MongoDB. Alright guys, in this video we're going to install MongoDB on a Linux Ubuntu system. So this is a little different than with Windows. I opened up the documentation here to install it on Ubuntu, which is really helpful. If we scroll down here, the first step is to import the public key using the package management system. So we actually have to run this here. So I'm going to copy this, and let's open up our terminal. Okay, let me just make that a little bigger. Alright, so we'll paste this in, this command here, and you may want to follow along with at this page as well. Alright, let's enter the password. Alright, requesting key from server. So now what we want to do is create the list file for MongoDB. Now I am on version 16.04, so I'm going to grab this command here, and we're going to paste that in. Alright, and then we want to reload the package database, so we can do that with sudo apt-get update. Okay, now we should be able to install the latest version of MongoDB with sudo apt-get install, and we just want to add the Y flag and then mongodb-org. Alright, so once that's done, we should be able to run the MongoD service. And we should be all set. Alright, so now let's go ahead and say sudo service MongoD start, and now we'll type in Mongo, and we're now in the Mongo shell. We can say show DBs, and we're all set. So pretty simple. That's how we can install MongoDB on Ubuntu. Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to install MongoDB on a Mac in OSX. So first thing you're going to want is to install Homebrew. If you don't have that, that is a package manager. So if you go to brew.sh, it gives you the command right here, and rather than type it all out, I'm just going to copy it, and then we're going to open up our terminal, and let's paste that in, and let's go ahead and run it. Alright, so press return to continue, and we're going to have to put our password in here. Okay, it's downloading command line tools for Xcode. Alright, so that did its thing. That took about, I'd say, 3 to 4 minutes. So now what we want to do is we want to just call brew update. Okay, already up to date. And now we can install MongoDB. So let's say brew install MongoDB. Now, just like we had to do in Windows, we need to create a data directory. So let's say sudo mkdir, and we're going to add the -p flag, and then let's say data-db. Put in your password. We also need to make sure that we have the right permissions. So let's say sudo chown, and let's see, we're going to put in here id-u, and then /data/db. Alright, so now let's say MongoD. Okay, so now we have the Mongo service running. I'm going to open up another terminal, and let's say Mongo. Okay, so now we're in the Mongo shell. We can say show DBs, and there we go. Alright, so that's how we can install MongoDB on a Mac. Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to install MongoDB on a Windows machine, which is pretty easy. We're going to go to mongodb.com and just click download. Okay, we're going to grab the correct version, which is probably going to be selected for you. I have a 64-bit system, so that's what I'm going to choose here. It says Windows Server 2008, but that's fine. There is no actual Windows 10 version. Now it's 148 megabytes, so it might take a minute or two. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to open that up. And we're just going to go through this installer here. Now I'm going to choose custom because I want to specify a different path. By default, it's going to go to our program files, MongoDB server, and then whatever version. I'm going to go ahead and change that to just a folder in my C drive. Alright, so in my C drive, I'm going to create a folder called MongoDB, and that's where we're going to put it. Okay, we'll click next and install. Okay, so now let's click finish, and now it is installed, but there's a couple other steps we need to do. We're going to open up a command line here and run it as administrator. Make sure you do that. And let's see, let me just make this a little bigger if I can. Let's see, font. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to navigate into that folder, which is in my C drive, MongoDB. And from here, we're going to say MongoD, and then -- directory per DB, then dash dash DB path. Now we need to specify a path for our data. So what I'm going to do is open up my file manager and go into where we installed Mongo, and right here we're going to create a folder called data, and in there we're going to create a folder called DB. Alright, we're also going to create in the MongoDB folder a folder called log for our logs. Now we'll go back here and let's specify the data path, which is going to be in our C drive, MongoDB /data/db. Okay, and then we want to specify the log path and the log file, so that's going to be C drive /MongoDB /log, and then we just want to specify a file name. I'm just going to call it Mongo log. Alright, then we're going to do dash dash log append so that everything gets appended in that file. We also want to be able to have a RESTful API, so we're going to do REST, and then finally we're going to do dash dash install, which will install it as a service. So let's go ahead and run that. Oh, MongoD is not recognized. Oh, we need to go into the bin folder. Sorry about that. And then let's try to run that again. All right. So now what we want to do is enable the service with net start MongoDB. Okay, now it says the MongoDB service is started, and it was started successfully. So we now have MongoDB installed and we have it running in the background. And we should be able to enter the Mongo shell by just typing Mongo, and there we go. We can say like show DBs, and it shows us our databases. Now I'm not going to go into this right now. I just wanted to get it installed. We'll get into the shell later on. All right, so that's how you install MongoDB in Windows. Alright, so we're now going to jump into the Mongo shell and we're going to start our project. So we're going to build a customer database. It's going to be pretty simple. This is kind of an introduction project. So we need to run MongoD as a service. Okay, so what we need to do is say sudo service MongoD and start. Okay, so that's going to start the service up if it wasn't already started. And then we should be able to just use Mongo, and that brings us into a shell. Alright, so let's look at some commands. So we have the command show DBs. That's going to show us the databases. By default, we have this admin in this local database. Now, to create a new database, what we want to do is just say use and then the database name. Alright, so let's call this, we'll just call it Acme. Alright, so you can see that we've now switched to the database called Acme. Now, we have no collections. If we say show collections, you can see we don't have any. So let's create a collection called customers. So we'll say db dot create collection, and we want to pass in here customers. Alright, you can see we get an OK1. So now if I say show collections, you can see we have a customers collection. Now we want to insert a customer into this collection. So let's say db dot and then the collection name, which is customers. And then we're going to do dot insert. And then in here, we need to insert a document, which is basically just a JSON object. So let's give it a first name of John and a last name of Doe. Okay, so if we run that, we get this right result, n inserted 1. Okay, so that means that one record was inserted. So now if we do db dot customers dot find, you'll see that gives us our customer, first name, last name. Notice that there's also this underscore ID, which is actually an object ID, which is a certain data type that MongoDB uses, and this is used as a unique identifier so that we can access access unique rows of data. Now there's also a function called pretty that we can add on to the find. So if we say .pretty, you'll see that it formats it nice and neat. It puts each key value pair on its own line, so it's a little easier to read. Alright, so let's insert some more customers here. So we'll say db.customers.insert, and this time I'm going to insert multiple customers. So we're going to use an array, so we'll put in some brackets here, and then we'll say first name, let's say Sam, last name Smith. Okay, then we'll put a comma after that curly brace and create another curly brace, and let's say first name, I'll say Michelle, last name Johnson, and then we'll do one more, first name Mike, last name Williams. Alright, so let's go ahead and run that, and you'll see right here n inserted 3, and now we're going to do a find .pretty, and you'll see we have 4 customers. Now all of these customers happen to have the same fields. They have an ID, a first name, and a last name, but that doesn't mean that we're stuck with just those fields as we would with a relational database. So let's go ahead and create another customer. So we'll say db.customers.insert. Okay, and let's say first name Wendy and last name Samson. And let's say we want to add we'll say occupation nurse. Okay, so that you can see that went in no problem. And now if we do a find, you'll see we still have all of our other customers, but we also have Wendy, which has an occupation of nurse. Okay, and that's absolutely no problem. It's fine that Mike doesn't have an occupation and Wendy does. So that makes not just MongoDB, but NoSQL in general, makes it very flexible. Alright, so we don't have to predefine everything. We don't have to predefine what type of data goes in these. So that's a huge advantage over relational database models. Alright, so let's go ahead and insert another one. I'm just going to click up here and just change some things. So let's change the name here to, let's say, Bob. And let's say Bob Jackson. Occupation, we'll say, we'll just say technician. And let's give him an age. Now for an age, we want this to be a number. Let's say 36. And notice that I didn't put quotes in because I want to treat it as a number. And let's see what else we could do. Let's say birthday. So for birthday, I want to put in a date. So we can actually use new date. We can use the date function. And let's say September 12th. And let's say 19. Oh, geez, I don't know. For 36, that would be, what, 1980, I believe. All right, so let's go ahead and try that. And then we'll do our find.pretty. And notice that age, 36, it doesn't have quotes around it. And then birthday is what's called an ISO date. Okay, so that's a certain format that we can have for our fields. So it's basically a date and time. All right. We also, if we want to just find one of these, we could do db.customers.find1. All right, and we can find by a specific field. So let's say first name let's say we want to find first name Wendy. Okay, and you can see that gives us Wendy back. Now, usually if you're going to use this in an application and you're using find one, you're probably going to want to search by the object ID, not by the first name, because if you have another Wendy, that's going to come back, or actually just the first one that it finds is going to come back, which you don't want. Okay, so you probably want to search by the object ID. Alright, so we have created a database, we created a collection, and we added a bunch of users. We queried those users, or I should say customers. Alright guys, so now that we have some customers in our database, we can check those out by saying db.customers.find, and we'll add .pretty. Okay, so we have all these customers. Now let's say we want to update someone. Let's say Mike Williams. Let's say we want to update him to, let's change his last name. So we'll change his last name to Thompson. So if we say db.customers.update, now that's going to take in a query. So we're going to say where first name is Mike. Now usually you would do by the ID. You want to look for it by the ID because you don't want to update everybody with the first name of Mike. But just to keep it simple and not have to put all this stuff in the ID, we're just going to use first name. Now if we go and we then say last name, and we wanted to change it to what? Mike Williams. I forget what I said I wanted to change it to. Let's say Hill. Okay, we want to change it to Hill. Now, if we run this, what it's going to do is it's going to look for this record, and then it's going to replace everything with just this. So he'll just have the last name Hill, and he won't have the first name Mike anymore. All right, so what we could do is we could also put the first name in here. So first name Mike, and if we run that, oh, what happened there? Invalid. Oh, the curly braces got messed up. We have 2 at the end here. Should actually be 1 right here. Okay, so now if we do a find and we look, and Mike Hill has been changed, but if we do it that way, we're going to have to, basically, if we don't want to change a bunch of fields, we're still going to have to enter them. So we can fix that by using something called set. So let's do custom db.customers.update, and again we're going to find the record where first name matches Mike. Okay, now in the second parameter, what we're going to do is put in some curly braces, and then we're going to put in money sign set, and then a colon, and then another set of curly braces, and then we're going to put last name Hill. Okay, so let's run that and then do a find, and now you can see Mike Hill, and we didn't have to put in the first name or any other fields. We could just put in the one we wanted to change, as long as we use that set. Now if we wanted to add something to Mike, let's say we wanted to add an occupation, then we could do that same set and then just add on to this. Alright, so let's say we want to add occupation, and let's say I don't know, bus driver. Okay, and let's say we also want to add let's add an age of, let's say, we'll say 48. Alright, so let's try and do that, and then we'll do db.customers.find, and let's say we want to find where first name equals Mike. Okay, actually let's do a .pretty. So now you can see that Mike now has an occupation of bus driver and the age of 48. So if you want to add fields to an existing an existing record, you can do that as well with set. Now, there's also some options you can use when you use update, and one of them is upsert. And what that means is that if you try to update something that's not actually there, should it insert it or not? So let's go ahead and try that. We're going to say db.customers.update. All right, and let's say where name, our first name, is Beth. All right, and then we want to just go and we want to do set, let's see, set curly brace, and we'll say last name, Jonas, and age, we'll say 26. All right, so let's see what happens if we just run this. We get 0 matched, 0 modified. Basically, it didn't do anything because it didn't find the first name of Beth. But if we go back and let's bring that query back and then go after this curly brace and put another parameter, this is going to be our options. So we want to set upsert, and we want to set that to true. And now let's run it. And you can see that there was none matched, but we did do the upsert. Okay, so now if we go and we do a find, there's Beth Jonas, age 26. Okay, so she got added even though she wasn't there because we used the upsert parameter, or the upsert option. Now, in addition to set, we also have unset. So let's say that for Mike Hill, he doesn't want his age shown anymore. So let's get rid of that age. So we'll say db.update, and we're going to say where first name is Mike, then we're going to say money sign unset. So we want to do unset and age 1. Okay, so let's, whoop, that's not right. It should be db.customers update. Because if we had more than one collection, it wouldn't know which collection we mean. Okay, so let's do a find again. And let's check out Mike Hill, and now he no longer has an age. Okay, so we can remove fields with unset. Okay, so let's move on to remove. So let's say we want to remove, we'll say Michelle Johnson. So we can say db.customers.remove. Now again, you'd usually use the object ID here, but just for simplicity, we're going to say first name Michelle. All right, so let's run that. You can see n removed 1. So now if we do a find, you can see that Michelle is no longer there. So that's how we can remove entries. Now we can also remove by kind of like queries, I guess. So let's say we want to remove everybody that is older than 30. All right, and right here you can see that we have Bob, who's 36, and Beth, that's 26. So in this remove, inside the curly braces, let's say age, excuse me, we'll say age, colon, open up some other curly braces, and in here we're going to use the money sign GT, which is greater than, and we'll say greater than 30. All right, so now let's do a find all again. And notice that anybody that was over 30 is gone, and we still have Beth, who was 26. Okay. All right, so that is update and remove. All right, guys, so this is the last video of this project. What I want to do now is show you how we can embed objects into our records as well as arrays. Okay, so this is pretty easy. We're just gonna go ahead and do an insert like we've been doing. So db.customers.insert, and in here we'll put in our curly braces, and let's say first name, say Peter, last name Carrie. All right, and let's give them an age of 28. Now I also want to put an address, so let's say address, except this is going to be an embedded object or even an embedded document. Okay, so we'll put in some curly braces, and then we'll put street. Okay, so for street we'll say 120 Main Street. Next we'll do the city. So let's say Chicago, and then we'll do the state. We'll say IL, and so let's do the zip or zip code, which I don't know, so I'm just going to put in anything. Okay, so now he has an address. So let's go ahead and enter that in, and then let's do a db.customers.find, and let's find by first name, and we want to find Peter. Actually, let's do a dot pretty at the end there. Okay, so now you can see that address is an embedded object. It's an object within an object. We have the street, the city, the state, and the zip code. All right, now let's look at arrays. Okay, so let's say that this customer, we want an array of services that they have. So let's do db.customers. Actually, let's just create a new one for this. So we'll say insert, and we'll say first name George, and last name Lopez. George Lopez is a customer. Okay, and let's say that he has a couple services. So let's put in services, and we want to set that to an array, so put in some brackets, and then we want this to be an array of objects. So this first one will be service underscore ID, and let's say Linux underscore hosting, and it'll also have a service underscore name, which will be the readable name, so we'll say Linux hosting. Alright, and then let's add, whoops, actually no, is that right? Yeah, that's right. So we'll put a comma there, another curly brace, and let's say service ID email hosting, and then a comma, and then we want the service name email hosting. Alright, so now he has two services, and let's say we also want another field called services count. So we'll go after the array, so right here, and we'll say services underscore count, and he has two. Alright, so let's enter that, and then we'll do db.customers.find, and let's find where first name, oh geez, I can't type, where first name is George. What did I do there? db customers find, I forgot the curly braces. Alright, so now George Lopez has two services. You can see it's an array of objects. He has the Linux hosting service and the email hosting, and then a services count of 2. Now, in the array, we didn't have to put objects. This could be an array of strings. It could be an array of numbers. It doesn't matter. But let's say we want to find just the services of this customer. So we could say db.customers.find, and we'll say first name George, and then what we want to do in the second parameter here is just say services1. Okay, and that gives us the ID of the customer, but then it just gives us his services. Now let's say we just wanted the service name of each one, so we could go back and instead of just saying services, we could say services dot service underscore name. Oops, what did I do there? Services dot service name. Actually, you know what? This, if we're going to do it this way, this has to be in quotes, I believe. There we go. So now it's just giving us the service name. So now let's say that we wanted to add a service to Peter's account. So we can say db.customers.update, and we want to do first name Peter, and then what we'll do is in the second parameter we're going to put in some curly braces and we're going to use push. Okay, push is used to do just that, push onto an array, so, or an object. So let's go push, and we're going to open up another set of curly braces and say services, and then we're going to put a colon and another set of curly braces, and we're going to put service underscore ID, and we'll say domain register, and let's give it a service name of domain registration. Okay, so now let's do a find. Oh, we're supposed to do George, not Peter. All right, well let's look at George. So db.customers.find, where first name is Peter. Okay, and let's make that dot pretty. Okay, so now you can see he has a services array with the domain register service, and if we did do George, it would have just added this onto it. So that's how we do it. So I think that covers embedded objects and arrays pretty well. Hopefully you guys liked this project. It was kind of an introductory to MongoDB syntax. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next project.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, do give us a thumbs up and share it. Also check out amazing discounts and offers on our premium courses in the description below.